straight left really sent him to the canvas. Very, very nice.
Lovely handiwork there from Conor McGregor.
As I went on and I achieved massive success and global, out of this otherworldly superstardom.
There was a time when Conor McGregor was collecting welfare checks in Dublin, Ireland. He had no money, no car, no belt. He was 22 years old, living at home, training in a gym that barely had proper equipment. And he was telling everyone he was going to be the most famous fighter on the planet. Most people laughed at him. The ones who didn't laugh doubted him anyway. And then he went out and did exactly what he said he would do.
The lightweight champion of the world, the Notorious Conor McGregor!
McGregor headlined the highest-grossing pay-per-view in UFC history. He made over $100 million in a single boxing match. He built a whiskey empire worth hundreds of millions. He walked into press conferences like a rock star and fought like it too. But this story isn't just about the wins, because as McGregor climbed higher and higher, the falls got harder and harder. Defeats, controversies, legal problems, a broken leg on live television in front of millions of people. This is the story of the most charismatic, most controversial, most complicated fighter the sport has ever seen, the Notorious McGregor. Conor Anthony McGregor was born on July 14, 1988 in Crumlin, a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Dublin, Ireland. Crumlin wasn't exactly a place that produced world champions. It was a tough area, high unemployment, rows of terraced houses, not a lot of obvious opportunities. McGregor's father, Tony, drove taxis. His mother, Margaret, worked hard to keep the family together. By all accounts, they were a loving, tight-knit family, but money was always tight. From a very young age, Conor had this restless energy that nobody really knew what to do with. He got into scraps, he had a mouth on him, and he hated the idea that his life had already been written out for him before he'd had a chance to write it himself. At 12 years old, he started boxing at Crumlin Boxing Club. He was good, but it was when he discovered mixed martial arts that something clicked. He began training under coach John Kavanagh at Straight Blast Gym in Dublin, one of the few real MMA gyms in Ireland at the time. Kavanagh saw it immediately. There was something different about this kid, not just the talent, the belief. McGregor would look Kavanagh in the eye and tell him he was going to be a world champion. Not might be, was going to be. Kavanagh, who has trained hundreds of fighters, later said it was unlike anything he'd seen. But belief doesn't pay rent. For years, McGregor trained every single day while collecting social welfare. About €188 a week from the Irish government. That was his income. He'd get on the bus to the gym, train, and get back on the bus home. No car, no sponsorships, just reps. His girlfriend, Dee Devlin, whom he'd met at a party in 2008, supported him through this whole period. She worked to pay their bills while he chased a dream that most people around him thought was completely unrealistic. And here's what makes this part of the story so important. McGregor wasn't just training to get good. He was studying the psychology of fighting. He became obsessed with a visualization technique where he would spend hours mentally rehearsing every single scenario of a fight. What punch he'd throw, how his opponent would react, where the finish would come. He called it the law of attraction. His coaches called it dedication. Either way, it worked. He started competing on the Irish MMA circuit. Then he caught the attention of the UFC. In April 2013, Conor McGregor made his UFC debut at the O2 Arena in Dublin. He knocked out Marcus Brimage in 67 seconds. The crowd went completely insane, and just like that, a star was born. What followed over the next 2 years was one of the most remarkable ascents in the history of combat sports. McGregor won fight after fight after fight in the UFC's featherweight division. And it wasn't just that he was winning, it was how he was winning. He was finishing people, quickly, brutally, and then talking about it afterwards in a way nobody in the UFC had ever talked before. He called out champions before he'd earned the right to. He made predictions that sounded insane, then went out and made them come true. He wore fur coats to press conferences. He called opponents names that made headlines around the world. UFC President Dana White, who had seen hundreds of fighters come and go, later admitted that McGregor was simply different. The sport needed a personality like his. McGregor understood, better than almost anyone in MMA history, that fighting was entertainment, and entertainment needed a story. And McGregor was the best storyteller in the room. He told anyone who would listen that he was going to become champion, that he was going to change the sport, that he was going to be rich beyond anything Ireland had ever seen. People bought tickets just to hear what he would say next. Then, on December 12, 2015, at UFC 194 in Las Vegas, Conor McGregor stepped into the octagon against Jose Aldo, a man who had been featherweight champion for a decade. Aldo was widely considered one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters on the planet. He hadn't lost in 10 years.
The notorious Conor McGregor, black trunks for the champion.
13 seconds later, it was over. McGregor stood in the middle of the octagon, arms raised, completely calm. Like he'd known it was going to happen that way all along, because in his head, it already had. Before we go further, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time to do that. We cover stories like this one regularly. Now, back to the story. McGregor wasn't finished. In November 2016, at UFC 205, the first UFC event ever held at Madison Square Garden in New York City, McGregor stepped up to fight Eddie Alvarez for the lightweight title. He already held the featherweight belt. If he won, he would become the first fighter in UFC history to hold 2 championship belts simultaneously.
Here in this round, though.
Oh, man.
Until that.
Oh, he's done. He's done.
It is all over. History has been made. Conor McGregor is the UFC lightweight champion.
What a performance.
He won in the second round, and he did it in front of a crowd of 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden who could barely contain themselves. It was the moment McGregor became something bigger than just a fighter. He was a phenomenon. The money followed accordingly. His pay-per-view numbers were breaking records. Sponsors were lining up. He was the face of the UFC. He was on magazine covers. He was being invited to football matches, boxing events, red carpet premieres. And then came the fight that changed everything. Not just for McGregor, but for the entire combat sports world. Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather was the most famous boxer alive. He was 49-0. He had never lost a professional boxing match. He was universally considered one of the greatest defensive boxers in history. McGregor had never had a single professional boxing match in his life. The fight was announced in June 2017. The boxing world told McGregor he had no chance. Most MMA fans thought it was a publicity stunt. Most analysts wrote it off completely. McGregor leaned into every bit of it. The press conferences were unlike anything combat sports had ever seen. McGregor called Mayweather a 40-year-old dancing man. He wore suits with money symbols on them. He sold the spectacle harder than anyone had ever sold a fight. On August 26, 2017, at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, the two men fought. For 9 rounds, McGregor held his own. He had Mayweather talking to him, visibly frustrated. The crowd was electric. In the 10th round, Mayweather finally got to him. McGregor was stopped. Mayweather won by TKO.
Another hook, and it's over. Robert Bird says it's over. Waves it off. McGregor.
And yet McGregor made somewhere between $100 million and $130 million from that fight. Here's where the story shifts. After the Mayweather fight, McGregor took over a year away from the UFC. He had a child with Dee Devlin. He launched his whiskey brand, Proper No. 12. He lived the life of a global celebrity. But he still had unfinished business in the octagon. On October 6, 2018, at UFC 229 in Las Vegas, McGregor fought Khabib Nurmagomedov for the lightweight title. It was the most purchased combat sports event in history at that point. Over 2.4 million pay-per-view buys. Khabib was everything McGregor was not inside the cage. Patient, methodical, relentless on the ground. He didn't talk much. He didn't need to. In the 4th round, Khabib submitted McGregor with a neck crank. It wasn't even close. But the fight itself was barely the story that night. After the final bell, Khabib climbed over the octagon fence and jumped onto McGregor's teammate Dylan Dennis, starting a brawl that spilled into the crowd. Members of Khabib's team then jumped the fence and attacked McGregor inside the cage.
No, and he's going right at Dylan Dennis. Mayhem. Oh, no. Corral Khabib Nurmagomedov.
It was chaos, live on television, in front of 20,000 people. Both men were fined and suspended by the Nevada Athletic Commission. The night left a scar on McGregor's career, his image, and, many believe, his spirit. He had talked his way to the biggest fight of his life, and he had lost convincingly. While all of this was happening in the cage, something else was happening outside of it. In September 2018, launched Proper No. 12 Irish Whiskey. Named after the Crumlin postcode where he grew up, the launch was enormous. McGregor promoted it with the same energy he promoted fights. He showed up at bars. He posted on social media constantly. He leaned on his global fan base. In its first month, Proper No. 12 sold out completely across the United States, Ireland, and the UK.
I heard in America, some people go to tasting classes to learn how to appreciate the subtle nuances of their whiskey. In Ireland, we go to the pub.
Within a year, it was one of the fastest growing spirits brands in the world. In 2021, McGregor sold the majority of his stake in Proper No. 12 to Proximo Spirits, the company behind Jose Cuervo Tequila. The reported deal value was around $600 million total for the brand, with McGregor taking home a reported $150 million from his share. From welfare checks to a 9-figure whiskey sale, the business instinct was real. Whatever was happening in the cage, outside of it, McGregor had built something that no fighter had ever built before. McGregor spent most of 2019 and 2020 dealing with controversies that followed him like a shadow. There were allegations, incidents in pubs, legal matters in Ireland. His image was taking a beating even when he wasn't fighting. But in January 2020, he came back to the UFC. Donald Cowboy Cerrone, McGregor knocked him out in 40 seconds, his fastest UFC finish ever. It looked like a reset, like the old McGregor was back. Then came the Dustin Poirier fights. In January 2021, McGregor fought Poirier at UFC 257. McGregor looked flat. Poirier stopped him in the second round with a series of body shots that McGregor simply didn't defend. It wasn't even a close fight in the end.
Hands in his hips, having a conversation, looking to finish the fight.
That's it.
Just like that.
Wow.
McGregor talked his way into a rematch almost immediately. July 10th, 2021, UFC 264. It ended in the most horrifying way possible. In the final seconds of the first round, McGregor threw a shot off the back foot and landed awkwardly. His left tibia, the large bone in his lower leg, snapped completely. He collapsed in the cage, his leg visibly broken, his foot pointing in completely the wrong direction. The fight was stopped. Poirier won by TKO due to doctor stoppage. McGregor was carried out of the octagon on a stretcher, still trying to talk, still trying to project confidence. But the image of that broken leg went around the world in seconds. He had surgery. He began the long road to recovery. And then, nothing. No fight. Month after month. Conor McGregor has not competed in a professional fight since that broken leg in July 2021. That is nearly 5 years without a fight. The comeback has been announced, cancelled, rescheduled, and discussed so many times that fight fans have largely stopped paying attention to the specific dates. In 2024, UFC 303 was scheduled for June 29th. McGregor versus Michael Chandler in one of the most anticipated comeback fights in UFC history. Posters were made, tickets were sold. The buildup had been going on for months. 14 days before the event, McGregor pulled out. The UFC cited a broken toe. The fight was cancelled entirely. Chandler fought someone else. McGregor was not on the card. The fallout was significant. Dana White was visibly frustrated. Fans who had held on to tickets for months were angry. Media coverage was brutal. McGregor posted on social media as if nothing had happened. And that, in many ways, is very Conor McGregor. The ability to absorb catastrophic PR moments and simply continue, unbothered, or at least appearing unbothered, is one of his defining traits. In the spring of 2026, McGregor went on social media and said 3 words that the combat sports world had been waiting nearly 5 years to hear. The rumors are true. After an 18-month layoff caused by issues with USADA, the United States Anti-Doping Agency, McGregor had finally been cleared to compete. And with that clearance came a target: International Fight Week, July 2026. The comeback is on. Whether you love him, hate him, or stopped believing in him after the 4th cancelled fight announcement, you'll be watching because that's what McGregor has always understood better than anyone in this sport. He doesn't just sell fights. He sells the possibility that something absolutely insane is about to happen. And right now, it just might. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe and check out the next video because this story, it's far from over.